evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Mableton Talk, hosted by Mick. We're really excited to have you here tonight and especially thrilled to welcome our special guest. Normally, Mableton Talk is exclusive to our members, but we thought that tonight's topic is so important both nationally and locally that we wanted to make this time accessible to everyone. We're honored to have members of the Cobb County Board of Elections with us. Each of them has served for several years and play a key role in making sure our votes are protected, counted, and that our voices are heard. We truly appreciate all the work they do for our community, and we're so glad they're here with us tonight. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer and Stacy to get it started. We'll make sure to leave time at the end for a Q&A so your questions can be answered. Again, thank you for joining us. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Stacy Efrat. I'm the Vice Chair of the Cobb Board of Elections. And I'm here with my colleague, Jennifer Mosbacher, who's the Chair of the Cobb County Board of Elections. And we're really excited to talk to Mick for the first time.
Thank you. We're glad to have you.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, did you want us to just get started?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So first, we're just going to give you like a brief introduction of who we are and how we got to being on the Cobb Board of Elections. So I'll start first. I am originally from Montgomery, Alabama. I was born and raised there until I moved to Atlanta in Georgia. And later on, as an adult, I got my MBA at Georgia State. I lived in East Cobb for 21 years. I am married and I have 3 kids. My oldest just started Kennesaw State as a freshman, and I've got 2 other children who are in Cobb Public Schools. And I've got a full-time corporate job in financial services. So I would say being on the Board of Elections is more like a side gig, which takes as much time as a full-time job, but without any of the pay almost. So it's my passion, and that's why I'm here. And to give you guys a quick update about how I got started in the election space, I have always been an active voter, but for almost my whole life, I would call myself not an informed voter. I would often go to the polls and vote knowing who was at the top of the ticket. And then when I got further down to the local candidates, I would just circle random names. And I'm very embarrassed now that I used to do that, but I think it's important to realize a lot of voters are the same way. And one of the things we like to do is make sure voters are more educated than I used to be at that time in my life. I became very interested in getting involved more than just voting in 2016 when I was watching the presidential campaigns. In 2017, I volunteered for the very first time to canvass for a congressional special election in my area. And that was really the starting point. Since that time, I volunteered with many campaigns. I became particularly passionate about registering people who live in apartments to vote. And I got interested in that when I was canvassing for campaigns. And I was sent to apartment complexes, and I learned that there were so many residents in apartments that were being missed by various campaigns and third-party organizations because often the apartment residents move a lot, but they don't always update their voter registration address when they move. So the campaigns and the organizations don't even have up-to-date data on apartment residents. Many apartment residents have just moved here from out of state and have never registered to vote in Georgia. So again, we don't have data on those people. And many people in apartments are young and they may have recently turned 18. Maybe they're now in their 20s and they just never thought about registering to vote once they became eligible. So I created a group called GRIT, and that stands for Georgians for Registration and Increased Turnout. And we started that in 2017, and there's now over 400 volunteers that have knocked apartment doors with us and registered voters all around Cobb County. And because of all of my involvement with registering voters, I kind of developed a reputation for myself. And I was appointed to be on the Cobb Board of Elections in 2023 to join the board, which has 5 members on it. So I'm halfway through my first term on the board. It is more work than I ever thought it would be, but it's very rewarding because I know how important this is for all of us in Cobb County. So that's it for me, and I'll turn it over to Jen.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Mosbacher, and I am a small business owner here in Cobb County. I have lived in Georgia since 1999, and I moved to Cobb in 2011. I also have an 18-year-old college freshman, and my husband actually is a data analyst, which is why I get super excited about working with all the election numbers. And he's a former chef, actually, so we eat pretty well in my house. I've been active in many causes throughout my life. I became particularly interested in elections and democracy work. I started working elections with my family. We all sort of got into working actually at the polls as a poll clerk and became an assistant poll manager. And then my husband and I implemented a drive to recruit poll workers in collaboration with other organizations and with the election office for the 2020 presidential election, which during that time of COVID, there was a very severe shortage of poll workers. So we did a lot of work in that field. And then after that, I was encouraged to apply to the Board of Elections, which I didn't really understand exactly all of what it did at the time and what that was going to be like. But I applied, and I was appointed by the Cobb Board of Commission Chairwoman Lisa Cupid in July of 2021. My first term was a 4-year term, July of 2021 through June of this year. And then I've actually been appointed for a second term. So I just started that. So I've got another 4 years ahead of me. I was initially the secretary, vice chair, and then was recently elected to be the chair. And then I want to talk for just a couple minutes about some of the things I feel like we've accomplished on the board, and then we'll dive into sort of what it is that the board does. But one of the things that I was a part of with a few other folks was implementing what we called the last call absentee by mail drop-off program at the libraries. And this allowed voters who had absentee by mail ballots, but the drop boxes had already closed, to be able to return them hand delivery in their communities, as opposed to having to drive to the election office or risk putting it in the mail where it wouldn't be counted if it wasn't received on 7 p.m. on election night. So that program was very successful. We ran that in the midterms in 2021, and hopefully we'll bring that back again as we look to the next year's midterms. And then one of the other things that we did on the board since I've been on, which was a pretty heavy lift, but a really important one, was we established voter challenge policies for what you've probably heard of as 229 or 230 voter challenges, where citizens can bring challenges against other citizens in Cobb County and challenge their voter registration status. And we put in the law itself is rather vague, so our board was actually able to put a policy in place that's now really a state model of what a voter challenge policy should look like. Some of my current board goals are looking forward to next year. We will be hiring a new election director. Right now we have an acting director, and that's one of our board responsibilities. And then I'm also really interested in seeing if we can develop a shift work model for our poll workers. Right now, a poll worker typically has to work a minimum of 14-hour day on election day. And I think we've got a lot of people who might be able to commit to the process of working elections if they had more flexibility in those times. So anyway, that's a little bit about me and sort of what my experience thus far has been on the board. And I think I'm going to take the first section, and then Stacy will jump in, and we hope that you all have some questions for us as we go. So I'm going to read just really quickly the actual mission of the Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration. Might seem a little dry, but very important. So the mission of the Elections Department is to register citizens of Cobb County to vote, to ensure that elections are free, impartial, fair, accurate, convenient, and accessible to all voters, to encourage voter participation, to provide excellent customer service to voters, candidates, and the media, and to help the public understand and follow all laws, rules, and regulations. The Elections Department, with oversight from the Cobb Board of Elections, enforces strict adherence to all current federal, state, and local laws, as well as to the State Election Board rules concerning registering to vote and voting. We serve all citizens in election-related matters. That's a lot of words, but it's really important. And I think the biggest take home for me and what I think our board really focuses on is ensuring that elections are free, impartial, fair, accurate, convenient, and accessible while adhering to the law. So I think if we were going to sort of summarize, that's really what we focus on our board. Our Board of Elections is governed by enabling legislation that created our board in 1985. So we're about 40 years old in Cobb County. There have only been 3 amendments to that legislation in 1990, 93, and 97. And we have a set of bylaws that up until just this year, so for 40 years, they had not been revised. So that was one of the big lifts that we did this past year, was actually revise our bylaws. We're a 5-member board. We have 4-year rolling terms. So 3 of us roll off in one 2-year cycle, and then 2 of us roll off in the other 2 years. We can serve 2 consecutive terms, or 2 terms total. So 8 years is the maximum anybody can serve on the board. And our appointments are by 2 seats are by the Cobb Legislative Delegation. 1 is by the Cobb County Board of Commissioners Chair. 1 is by the Democratic Party, and 1 is by the Republican Party. So my appointment is actually by Lisa Cupid, and Stacy's is actually by the Democratic Party of Cobb County. And then we have 3 other board members. I have a little slide to show you that represents our constituency. And I'll just tell you a little bit about sort of who we serve. If you just give me 1 second, I'll share my screen. Don't know if y'all can see that. So I've got a little slide here. So we have 515,938 active registered voters here in Cobb County, about 188 elections and registration staff, 7 municipalities, 37 county-wide elected officials, 14 Board of Education elected members, 49 municipal elected officials, 22 members of our delegation, and 5 federal officials. So all of that is, sort of the constituency that we oversee, and it's a lot. It's a pretty big undertaking for our 5-member board, for sure. So our key responsibilities are: we authorize voting precinct polling locations. So actually where you go to vote on election day is authorized by our 5-member board. When you can vote during early vote periods, those advanced voting schedules are actually defined and approved by our board. We're responsible for the recruitment, hiring, and potential dismissal of the election director. So that we actually have 1 employee who reports to our board. We oversee the election night returns. So on election night, we actually have to stay in the office from the time the polls close until the very last vote is counted. So that's one of our responsibilities. And then after the election, we actually are responsible for certifying the election. So the official election results are certified by our board. And then we set board policy, including voter challenges, public comment, and voter education. We actually hear voter challenges, and then overall our responsibility is for maintaining accurate voter rolls. And I show you this. This is our election code book for the state of Georgia, 650 pages worth of election code that we're really responsible for knowing, even though many of us aren't attorneys on the board. We do have a board attorney, but ultimately, our key responsibilities are defined by that election code and 3 very important pieces of federal legislation, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, the 1993 National Voter Registration Act, which many of you have probably heard of or know as the Motor Voter Bill. And then in 2002, the Help Americans Vote Act, the HAVA Act, which was actually really standardized voting machines and equipment and was a response to the debacle in the 2000 elections. So we have a lot of law that sort of governs what we do, but that's a big overview. So I wanted to just make sure that that was that we covered the federal and the state laws. And then I'm going to pass it back over to Stacy to talk to you a little bit about the different ways we can vote here in Cobb County.
Election-related entities first, right?
Oh,
she's already muted. But before we get into ways you can vote, I wanted to cover a couple other election-related entities because I think there could be confusion with people who aren't familiar with all the different groups that are in charge of how elections are run. So I'm sure everyone's heard of Secretary of State, and you might not understand what are the county elections boards and offices do compared to what does the Secretary of State do. So the Secretary of State is a statewide position. They oversee all elections in the state of Georgia, including local, state, and federal elections. After every county certifies their county elections, it rolls up to the state of Georgia, and the Secretary of State certifies all of the Georgia counties elections into one. So if you remember last year in the presidential election, Cobb County certified the votes for the presidential election that were made in Cobb County. And then every county did that. And then the Secretary of State would certify the state as one whole. So the counties run their own elections, and then they're certified by the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is also responsible for maintaining the voter registration database. You might have heard some news stories about voters being taken off the rolls. There's actually federal legislation for voters that are inactive after a certain number of years. It's the Secretary of State that is tasked with following that law and removing voters per the law. It's not the counties that handle that part. So the Secretary of State ensures compliance with state and federal election laws. And one common question that we sometimes get at our election meetings is, why are we using this voting machine? Why don't we move to paper ballots? You know, these are all very good questions. Each county does not get to choose what machine people vote on. It is the Secretary of State that makes that decision for the entire state of Georgia. So if, let's say, you know, we as a board decided not to use the voting machines we have, that's actually not a choice we get to make. That's a Secretary of State decision. So just want everyone to know, especially those people who come and complain to us, whether we agree with you or not, we cannot decide on what machines are being used. Then there's another entity called the State Election Board. Some of you may have heard of it, maybe others have not. So the State Election Board can create election rules. And I will quote something so I don't get it wrong, but the board is authorized to adopt rules and regulations that are conducive to the fair, legal, and orderly conduct of elections. And so, you know, they can create their own rules. They just can't conflict with our state election laws. The State Election Board can also make enforcement actions, and they can initiate administrative enforcement proceedings, direct compliance, and impose penalties for violations in the election code. The State Election Board is also a policymaking role within the State Election Administration, and it could make recommendations to the legislature regarding changes to the election laws, but ultimately it's the legislature that can change or create election law. The State Election Board is composed of one chair that's elected by the legislature, one member elected by the state Senate, 1 member elected by the state House, and the Democratic Party of Georgia and the Republican Party of Georgia each get 1 appointee to the state election board. So that I just wanted to cover the Secretary of State and state election board so you know what roles they play compared to what each county election board plays. So now I feel like we're going to talk about something more interesting. How can you vote? What are the different ways you can vote? Because this applies to every single person listening to this. There is, of course, election day voting, where on election day, it's always on a Tuesday, you are assigned one specific polling location, and you must go to that polling location and nowhere else if you want to vote on election day. Polls are open on election day, always from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. In the last several years, advanced voting has become more and more and more popular. Advanced in-person voting is actually a form of absentee voting by state law. So we call it advanced voting, but it is one type of absentee voting. Almost always, advanced voting in person is for 3 weeks preceding election day. And this is a very important fact that some people know and some people don't. You can vote in any advanced voting location in the county where you're registered. So if you live in Cobb County, you don't have to go to the advanced voting location closest to your house. You can go to any advanced voting location in Cobb County. Unlike on election day where you only have one option of where to go. There are wait times for advanced voting that are listed on the Cobb Elections website. It's cobbelections.org. And, I would recommend for anybody who wants to do advanced voting, always check where the advanced voting locations are at each election, because often they do change. Now, absentee by mail is the form of absentee voting that everyone's familiar with. In the last few years, I can't remember the year, the legislature shortened the period where you can apply for your absentee ballot. You can apply as early as 78 days before the election and as late as 11 days before an election. We recommend do not wait until the last day to apply for your absentee ballot because you risk not receiving it in time. So please, as soon as you think about it, if you're in that window, go ahead and apply for your ballot to guarantee that it gets to your house in time for you to fill it out and turn it back in before election day. You're going to need a printer to be able to print your application. There are parts you can fill out online, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to have a wet signature, which means pen and paper to sign your name. So you will need a printer to be able to finish applying for your ballot. There are different ways you can return your absentee ballot. You can mail it in, you can hand deliver it in, or you can put it in a drop box. Or you can, what I like to do is I scan it and email it back to the Cobb Elections office. I like to scan and email it back because I know, and I'm talking about my application, not my actual ballot. But if I'm requesting an absentee ballot, I print the whole form, I fill it out by hand, sign it by hand, and then scan it and email it back to the office. The Cobb Elections office is really good about emailing a response saying we have received your absentee ballot request. And usually, in my case, it's about 1 to 2 weeks before I receive my actual absentee ballot in the mail. Once you get your absentee ballot in the mail, you're going to fill it out. You're going to make sure to sign it. There's an inner envelope where you have to put in your name. I think it's your birthday, your signature. Make sure that's filled out completely in order for your vote to be counted. And then it should be very clear, but you fold up your ballot, stick it in the inner envelope, put all that in the outer envelope, make sure everything's filled out. And there are a few different ways you can turn in your actual absentee ballot. You can put it in the mail, but do not do that unless you have, let's say, a week until election day, because we don't want anyone to put it in the mail and have it not be received in time. You can hand deliver it to the elections office, or you can put it in a drop box. And the drop boxes are located at some, not always all, but some advanced voting locations. It's very important to, again, before every election, check which advanced voting locations have a drop box, because we don't want anyone wasting a trip where there's not a drop box available. If you apply for an absentee ballot and then you change your mind and say, you know what, I know I applied for an absentee ballot, but I'd really like to just vote in person on the machine, that's totally fine. We recommend you bring your absentee ballot with you and you turn it in when you show up, and they'll destroy your ballot. That part won't be counted, and then you'll go and vote on the machine. So I think that covered. Jen, chime in if I missed anything there. If not, I will keep going. Now, what are the upcoming elections? Well, guess what? You've got an election. Every person in Georgia has an election on November 4th, which means right now you have an election because advanced voting is open. So election day is Tuesday, November 4th. This election covers the Public Service Commission, which is for all of Georgia. Everyone who lives in Georgia has Public Service Commission on their ballot. If you also live in a municipality, such as, let's see, Ackworth, Austell, Kennesaw, Mableton, Marietta, and Powder Springs, if you live in one of those cities, you have a municipal election. That means mayor, city council, it could possibly be school board. So no matter what, if you're a registered Georgia voter, you've got an election. You don't even have to wait till November 4th. Go to your advanced voting location and vote, or vote by mail. Let's see. Advanced voting has already started, and it goes until October 31st. There are 3 days left to apply for your absentee by mail ballot, if that's how you'd want to vote. Now here's a little bit of a confusing wrench to throw into this story. There is now a special election that has been called 2 weeks after the already planned November 4th election. If you live in Senate District 35, you have a special election on November 18th. State Senator Jason Estevez resigned his Senate seat because he's running for governor. So that means there's a special election to replace Jason Estevez in Senate District 35. Assuming most of you on this in this meeting live in Mableton, there is a sliver of Mableton that is in Senate District 35. So please, everybody, check what district you're in. You can go to the Georgia MVP site. If you don't know what Senate district you're in, if you live in Senate District 35, you could either vote twice, for one in each election, or there's one overlapping period of advanced voting. So if you want to do voting the last week of the November 4th election, which is it's like the week of, I don't know, the 26th, I believe, you can vote in the special election and the municipal PSC election on the same day in the same place. There is one location for advanced voting for Senate District 35, and it's at, is that Taylor Bronner Park? Jen, I don't have that in front of me.
Yes, it's at the Taylor Bronner House, and
Yeah,
I can put
Taylor Bronner House, yes.
Flyers up. So.
I know that's a lot of information to remember. We can send it, we can put it in the comments, or we can send it to Elizabeth and she can publish it. But the important thing to remember is that everybody has an election happening right now. And if you live in Senate District 35, you have a second election almost at the same time, 2 weeks later. Jen, I'll
And
turn it back to you.
yeah, the only thing I want to add that I feel like we sort of glossed over a little bit is that everybody has, for the November 4th election, there's the 6 municipalities that all have municipal elections, but everybody in the county actually has has the 2 PSC. District 2 and District 3 are on everybody's ballot. So even if you don't live in a municipality, you actually still have both PSC races. And if you live in a municipality, you will have the PSC races in addition to your municipal elections. So make sure that that's, you do your part to sort of do that research. And I think it's an interesting tidbit, but District 2 and District 3, actually, neither of those districts are within Cobb County, but the PSC is actually voted on statewide. So even though each district has a specific commissioner, we vote statewide for the Public Service Commissioner race. And then for Senate District 35, if you have any questions about whether or not you live in that district, we have on our website and on the Georgia My Voter page, you're able to look that up and see sort of where you fall in those boundaries. And you will have 3 weeks of early vote for that. So just to clarify that. One of the things that I did want to talk about is how do we sort of prepare ourselves to vote, and what are some ways that, what are the steps that we take before we actually show up at the polls? One of the things that we offer here in Georgia and in Cobb County both is an opportunity to review your sample ballot. So if you're looking for that, you can see that on the Cobb Elections website or on the Secretary of State's Georgia My Voter page. Both of them will allow you to view. If you actually know, if on the Georgia My Voter page, you just would log into that with your date of birth and your county, your first initial and your last name, and that'll bring up your My Voter page. It'll confirm you're registered. It will also let you see your polling precinct, all of your early vote information, as well as your sample ballot. And then in addition, we have sample ballots on our Cobb Elections website for you. So if you're in a municipality, you can see that, plus the PSC races and those candidates. So I encourage everybody to print that sample ballot, look that over, and do your research. Educate yourself. Know before you go in which candidates you want to vote for. And while we can't have our phones when we're actually looking at when we're voting, what you can do is print that sample ballot, make your selections, and that way you're an efficient voter when you get up to those ballot marking devices. You want to make sure that you bring photo ID with you in the state of Georgia. We actually have 6 acceptable forms of voter ID. Everybody knows that they can bring their driver's license, and actually in Georgia, you can have an expired Georgia driver's license or a valid current Georgia driver's license. You can have your passport, but it needs to be current. You can also have a photo ID that's issued by any government entity as long as it has a photo. You can have an employer ID card that's issued by a government entity, a U.S. military ID with a photo, or a tribal identification card with a photo. And then the other piece that I want to let everybody know about is that in our elections office, we actually provide free voter ID cards. So if you don't have any of those forms of ID with a photo, you can come to our office. We have a station set up much like you would at the Department of Driver Services. You can get your photo taken, and you'll get a temporary ID that you can use at the polls, and then you'll get your physical card sent to you in the mail. So that's a free service that we provide, and actually any Department of Driver Services can actually give you a free photo ID card for voting purposes, as well as any county offers those services. And then I want to encourage everybody to make a plan. I think the way that we encourage voting, and what I teach when I go and speak with different high school students or youth organizations, is that make a plan. Know when you're going to vote. We have 3 weeks of early vote here in Georgia. So, pick a day that works for you. Currently, for this election cycle, our polls are open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have 2 Saturdays and 2 Sundays. So you can go to the polls, and it's good for you to mark that on your calendar, know when you're going to go, and make sure that you have a backup plan. So if I don't make it on this Tuesday, maybe I'll get there on Saturday in the morning. And then also make sure that you know if you want to vote by mail or if you want to vote in person. I think those are sort of that's kind of the high level of how to pick what you want to do. Is, many people think they want to vote by mail and then they change their mind. So you can always change your mind, but make a plan. And then election day, make sure you confirm that precinct for your polling location. We've had a lot of changes recently. There's been so many elections in Cobb County. We'll have had 9 elections in Cobb County by the end of the year, that we've had a lot of precincts that either haven't been available or have decided that they just didn't want to do this anymore or host our elections. So we've got some co-located precincts. We've had to move some locations. So I encourage everyone, make sure that before you go, you check where your election day polling precinct is. You can do that on your Georgia My Voter page. That's the quickest and safest way to make sure you've got the right place. And then let us know if you have any questions about that, the different ways that you can prepare yourself to vote. The next thing I want to talk about is sort of ways that you can get involved in elections. There's a myriad of different ways to do this work. But the very first and probably most important is to register to vote. Make sure you're registered, make sure your family members are registered and all your closest friends. There's voter registration deadlines before every election cycle, so you want to check those. But at the end of the day, make sure that you yourself are registered, and you can check your Georgia My Voter page. It will tell you if you're an active registered voter in Georgia. You can become a poll worker. We're always looking for poll workers. You can apply online. You'll get an email that'll introduce you to the different options, but you can work election day, which we have different types of people that work election day. There actually are the people that work at the polls on election day. And then there are also what we have called, we call them our equipment technicians. So we have people, if you have, a particular background in equipment and technology, we're always looking for people who can help us. When a piece of equipment goes down, we send them out. We do the training and we send you out to help, keep our polls up and running. We have 148 precincts in Cobb County, so it's a lot to manage on election day. We also have advance in-person day workers and couriers, people who bring supplies back to the office. So it's also a cool way to be involved. And we do have shift work at our absentee in-person, at our advance in-person locations. So you can work a half day, you can be a courier. There's lots of options there. And then we also have an opportunity to work election night. And that is through our prep center, where people, I almost equate it to like NASCAR, like our 148 precincts bring all their poll pads back and their, all their sort of like important paperwork. They bring all that back, and we have a system in our office where we check in all the equipment and we check in all the poll managers with all that equipment as they come in. And so it's a big operation, and we use a lot of people who come in to just work for that particular election night, which is a really cool process to see happen. And then there's always an opportunity to actually work in our office and become either a part-time worker or a seasonal worker. And those opportunities we have, if you go onto our website, you'll see what openings we have available. There are absentee ballot clerks who check in the ballots when they come in. There's a lot of different teams of people who work customer service and work the phones in our office, both seasonally and part-time. So definitely reach out to us about that. It's a great way to learn about what it is that we do and how elections work. The sort of on the civic side of things, I would say host a voter registration drive. You can host that in your neighborhood. You can host that for your community. You can host it at a high school. Lots of different opportunities to work, to actually encourage people to register. Even if there's a fair or some type of community event going on, you can partner with our office. We'll get you the materials, we'll give you the training, and you can actually do a voter registration drive. That's something Stacy, she just actually did that at Kennesaw State University, where her son goes, and had a great turnout. So, we do it as board members, and we encourage the community to learn about how to register voters. And then I also wanted to tell you that in our office, we are always excited to welcome people. We do tours. And so if you have a group of people that you'd like to get together for a tour, we just had Pope High School come in for a tour. We love to encourage people to come and see the behind the scenes, see how it works, and get a tour of our office. Ideally, that's something that we would do as a group, and you can reach out to any of us board members and we can get you in touch with the right staff to coordinate and schedule that. It's a little complicated to do right now because we're running 4 different elections. We've got 2 in November and 2 in the runoffs in December. So, but maybe looking to Q1 of next year might be a nice time if, there's a group of Mableton Improvement Coalition folks who want to get together and come have a tour. And then one of the last things I want to talk about is a little personal endeavor that I've been you sort of researching and trying to bring to different schools is there is something called the Civic Engagement Diploma Seal here in Georgia. And we're starting to partner with high schools to encourage kids to get their volunteer hours through working with our office so that they can obtain this seal on their diploma and also have this sort of opportunity to engage in election work and understanding how that functions in our democracy. So that's basically, just another little tidbit, especially if you have kids in high school. We're allowed to in Georgia register starting at 17 and a half. So they would register. We can, teach kids about those voter registration opportunities in high school, but also get them involved, coming to board meetings, working the elections, and seeing that process and hopefully creating sort of a drive in our youth to be engaged citizens and active voters. And that's pretty much, I don't know if Stacy has any other things she wants to add to that. Stacy does a lot of voter registration work, so she might be able to give you some background on how to run those drives.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we need to go into details here, but I'm happy to respond individually if anybody has specific questions about how to get that started up. It really depends on, if you're going to a neighborhood or, like a retail business or whatever. So, I'm happy to take questions. You can email me at my Cobb County address. It's stacy.efrat@cobbcounty.gov. And maybe Elizabeth can publish those afterwards, but, we're happy to take individual questions. And I think we're going to start Q&A from some of the questions that we've received from the group. Elizabeth, Beth, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much. This has already been very informative and helpful. So thank you so much just for being thorough and taking the time to speak with us today. Okay, so some of the questions, I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll. So I see. I've heard complaints that the voting machines aren't secure. How are you confident that the results are accurate?
Jen, you want to take that one?
We have a very, first of all, I think a lot of people have that question. And I think that understanding the election process, I certainly encourage anybody to come to our office during our logic and accuracy testing, which happens before the election, where we test all the equipment. I think that's a really excellent opportunity to learn about how the equipment actually works. But in terms of accuracy, we have several different state mandated audits that are done in addition to tying out both. When you check in on the poll pads, those check-ins, we tie that information out to the number of votes cast. So we always know we have an audit that goes against sort of the poll pads, the voter check-ins to votes cast. Our votes are anonymous, so we can't tie anything back to anybody, but we're able to see those two things through our reporting. And then also the state has a risk limiting audit process that you've probably all heard about, where they pick a race, we do hand counts. That's all open to the public to come view. So, and we post, actually, we're legally required to post that notice. So you'll see actually when we're going to do that. And then we have different teams of people who sit across from each other, and they literally hand count those ballots, and we tie those back to our electronically counted ballots. So there's several different steps in the process of auditing that happen along the way. Some are state mandated and some are our own processes.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question, why does my polling place seem to change frequently?
So this probably applies to some people, but not all. Some people never have a polling place change, and some people might seem to get postcards, what seems like every year, which possibly it is. We are at the mercy of our community partners to host elections and make themselves polling locations. Some of our locations are owned by Cobb County, which makes it easier to secure those. Other polling sites might be churches or private organizations that are volunteering to be a polling site. Sometimes those locations might go through renovations and say, we don't have the space right now. We need to temporarily not be a polling place while we're making updates to our building. And then we have to find a temporary location. There might be a church that says, you know what, Cobb County, you're having 9 elections in 2025. Like, we didn't sign up for 9 elections. We can maybe host 2 elections a year, but we need our space to actually do our own business here. And so we've had polling sites pull out this year just because they can't keep up with all the elections that Cobb County seems to be having these days. So most of those changes are out of our control, but when that happens and we have an organization tell us that they cannot host, then we have to find an alternate site and then send notices to all those affected voters. So we understand the burden that it causes the voter. We try to do everything in our power to minimize that burden. Sometimes we just don't have control over that. But, we encourage every single person to follow Cobb County elections on social media, check the website often, because even if you miss the postcard, we will be posting that information on those platforms.
Thank you.
One more thing, very important. Everyone needs to get familiar with their My Voter page. This is a website. I usually just put in Google GA space MVP, which is Georgia My Voter page, and it will immediately take you to a main page where you enter your first and last name, your county, and your date of birth, and it pulls up your My Voter page with all of your information. It gives you what address you're registered at, where your election day polling place is, who your representatives are for all the different offices, from like school board to legislators and all those other things. So it's very helpful. If your polling place changes, you can always go to your My Voter page and it will tell you where your most current polling location is. So check it every single election right before you vote, just to make sure you're not going to go to the wrong place.
Are there ever any last minute updates to that? Like, how frequently is it updated?
It will be updated before advanced voting starts at every election. And hopefully there won't be any changes, but even sooner before that, but at the minimum. And Jennifer, did you have anything to add to that part?
No, the Georgia My Voter page is by far, like, that's the Georgia database that's used. It's updated every time there's a voter registration update. So like if you get a new driver's license, you'll see that instantly. When your ballot, you actually can track your ballot through the Georgia My Voter page. So that's another really important part of you can see when your vote is, if you vote in person, you'll actually see when that vote is recorded as well. So it's a good place to do all of that sort of tracking from start to finish.
Perfect. Okay, next question. Is Cobb County required to keep the inner envelope? For how long? And how can this be verified?
All materials that are related to the absentee ballot are statutorily required to be kept as evidence. And anybody who wants to view, there's evidence it's in storage, it's all tagged, it's all, everything is kept as evidence for each election cycle. And there's a state mandated time for all the different sort of components. So I don't know all of those rules off the top of my head. Like I said, there's a 650-page code book in front of me here. But the truth of the matter is all of those records are available to the public through open records requests at various times. Some of the records are sealed, so you would have to get a court to release those records. It sort of depends on which thing you're looking for, but we keep all election evidence.
Perfect. Okay, so next question. My signature on my license is not like my real signature because of the stylus. How does that work? Would my ballot be bounced because signatures not matching enough?
There's not signature match in Georgia. So that's not that was something that we used to have to do in a prior system where we actually had to like tie those signatures, but no, we use the ID. There's mandatory ID that's required. So that's, you either have to include that photo ID or you have to put your driver's license and your social security in that envelope. So we're tying it out through DDS records.
Perfect. I'm sorry. I'm trying to, there's a lot. Can't read some of them.
I did see one comment from Tanya saying you cannot drop an absentee ballot application in a Dropbox. So she's correct, and I just wanted to reiterate that. So there's absentee applications, which can either be mailed, and delivered. The only thing you can put in an actual Dropbox is the actual absentee ballot. So thank you, Tanya, for making that clear.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to scroll. I know we're running out of time, so I'm trying to make sure I give everyone an opportunity. Okay, let's see. So are you all able to say, so what oath do board members make to serve on the board?
There's an oath and we take it. And I believe if somebody is interested in reading that oath, I'm happy to email it to them because it's a long oath.
Yeah.
It's prescribed I believe it's in the labeling legislation.
Yeah, I don't remember word for word, but I think you're taking an oath to follow the state constitution and the federal constitution. That's, again, as far as I remember. I took my oath 2 years ago. We had a judge swear us in. Jen just took her oath a second time when she got sworn in for her second term. I think, did you have to retake your oath, Jen? I can't remember. Yeah,
I did.
Okay. Yes. So at the beginning of each term, we take our oath, and it's sworn in by the judge. And yeah, what the wording was.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to scroll over to see. Let's see. Okay, and this is similar, but what is your fiduciary obligation to the people of Cobb County? This probably would be the last one that we'll be able to take for tonight, given our time, but I wanted to make sure I at least tried to get as many of them as possible.
Well, I'm not entirely sure, like in terms of fiduciary obligation, what that's referencing. I mean, our obligation is to run elections, and we have a budget that's managed by the county. Our board actually doesn't have or maintain a budget. So, the cost of the election is the cost of the election. We have a budget, we submit a budget to the county, and every county in the state of Georgia has to actually authorize the elections budget. But I will be honest that most of the time we end up having to move line items around. We have different obligation. We just ended up adding an election, 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we ended up adding another election that's a runoff that's probably going to cost somewhere around $400,000 to run, $200,000 each. So that's unplanned for election expense that the governor called for an election not on the election day that was happening. So fiduciary responsibility is a little bit, it's a difficult question to answer because our obligation is to run elections and not necessarily we run them in an economically responsible way, but we have to run the election. We have 3 weeks of early vote. We have things that are statutorily mandated, but they're not statutorily funded.
Sorry. Okay, well, is there anything else that you guys wanted to share that you did not have an opportunity to share with us today? Or is there anything else ahead of our upcoming local elections that we have that you think would be beneficial for us to know or to keep in mind?
I think the most important thing is we're in the early vote period right now, and I encourage everyone to vote early. I think that's really, get out there, vote early. There's plenty of opportunity between now and election day to vote. And I think that let's take advantage of those opportunities. I also say, check your My Voter page, make sure your friends check their My Voter page so that everybody knows where they're supposed to go and when. And I think that making sure that you're an educated voter. So look up your candidates, do your research, attend a candidate forum, do those things to get to know who your candidates are and who you're voting for, because I think local elections really matter. Those are the things that impact our day-to-day lives.
I would say don't forget about the local elections. They affect your life more than all those federal seats do. So I'm talking school board, city council, mayor, your state legislators. I know, president, governor, Congress, that's what everyone has at the top of their mind, but it's really important to focus on those local positions when you go vote. If it's a presidential year, don't just stop at the top. Go all the way down your ballot and make sure you vote for everything. Those smaller elections, the smaller local seats are critically important. And as Jen said, do your research before you show up. Don't be like me 20 years ago where I would just show up and circle random names at the bottom of the ballot because I didn't know who any of these people were. That was very ignorant of me. I didn't know any better at the time. Now I do. So there's a election going on right now. 80% of everyone I talk to doesn't even know what Public Service Commission is. Please educate yourself before you go. Figure out what the role is, what characteristics you want out of the people that hold that seat, and then go out and research those candidates. The second thing I'll leave you with is please take a young person with you to vote. We do not see good turnout of young adults, and that is very sad for me. I think it's just not on everybody's radar. We have work and school and everything else, and young people just aren't in the habit of voting at the same rate that older adults are. So when you go vote in this election in the next few weeks, find a young person in your life who's registered to vote and take them with you.
Thank you. That is remarkable advice. I still remember the first time I went to vote, and honestly, it was very impactful. And I've tried to maintain that from that moment forward. So thank you so much for sharing that, for encouraging that, and for everything that, again, that you ladies do. We don't take it for granted. We recognize it is a lot, especially knowing that you hold full-time jobs and you have families. And so I can't even begin to imagine, but seriously, thank you. We appreciate you. Thank you for being just a wealth of knowledge, for making yourselves accessible to us, for just answering all of the questions. And again, and you mentioned that you had some resources that you would share. So if you do, please give it to me and I'll do my best to try to get it to everyone. And for those, again, that were able to watch, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, this is normally what we offer to our MIC members. And so if you're not a MIC member, please go check us out at mableton.org. And again, on the heels of Jennifer and Stacy, get out and vote. Vote, vote, vote. It matters. It counts. So vote, vote, vote. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
Thanks.